So here we are in Visual Studio. What we're going to do is come over here and create a new project. We're going to search for console and then create a C# console application. We just click next. We're going to call this console app project data processor and we're going to select .NET 6 here. Let's go and hit create. And now we have our data processor console app. Notice that when we create a console application in Visual Studio 2022 with .NET 6, the template is making use of top-level statements. This just abstracts away the main method that you might be familiar with if you've created console applications in previous versions. And you can follow this link here to learn more. Just going to remove these 2 lines of code. Let's go and create a new class in this project. We're going to call this class File Processor. Just add that. And we're going to make use of file scoped namespaces here to reduce the nesting. Just going to hit Control period and then hit Enter to convert this to file scoped namespaces. I'm also going to come up here and hit Control period to remove unnecessary usings. So as its name suggests, this file processor class is going to be responsible for processing files. We're just going to add some basic items to this class to get started. The first of which is a string property called input file path, which represents the path where the input files are going to be located. We'll create a constructor that takes a file path as a string and just sets the input file path property to the value that's passed into the constructor. And then we'll create this public process method. All this is doing at the moment is using the console's writeLine method to write out the message begin process of and then specify the input file path from the input file path property. To allow us to access the console's writeLine method without having to prefix it every time with console dot, we'll add a using static system.console directive here, which will give us access to all of the static methods of the console class. So now we've got this file processor class, we're going to come back to the program.cs file here and make use of it. The first thing we'll do is add a using directive to the data processor namespace, which is where this file processor class is defined. And once again, we'll add a using static system.console because we'll be making use of the console class throughout this program.cs file. Let's start off with a simple writeLine statement telling the user that we're passing the command line options that can be passed into this console app. And to keep things simple in this demo so we can concentrate on the file access code, I'm not going to go and add a lot of command line validation code. The first command line argument that can be passed into this console application is the command that we want to execute, such as whether we want to process a single file or a directory full of files. If you've created console applications in previous versions of .NET, you'll be familiar with this args variable that essentially contains an array of strings with all of the command line parameters that were specified when the console application was executed. So the first command line argument we expect is this command, and if this command is equal to --file, we expect the user to have entered the file path to the file that they want to process. We're going to get this from the second argument in the args array. And we'll just write this out to the console window. And then we're going to call a process single file method that we'll create in just a moment. We'll add an else if, checking if the command is equal to --dir, which is how the user specifies that they want to process an entire directory of files. When we process a directory of files, we need to get the directory path that was specified by the user, and also the types of files that they want to process. We're going to get this from the third item in the args array. Once again, we'll add a writeLine statement to say what's going on, and then we're going to call this process directory method, which we'll create in just a moment, passing in the directory path and the file type. If the command is anything else other than --file or --dir, we're just going to write out this error message. We'll then ask the user to press enter to quit the application. So we need to create the process single file and process directory methods. We'll just come down here. We'll start off by creating the process single file method. And what we want to do here is create an instance of the file processor class that we just defined and pass in the file path as the constructor parameter. We can then go and call the process method. To make this compile, we'll also need to add the process directory method. I'm just going to paste this in here, and this is currently an empty method, just so we can get the compilation to succeed. Speaking of compilation, let's go and build this to make sure we haven't introduced any errors, and the build succeeds. If I just head over to File Explorer, you can see that we've already got the PS data directory here in the C drive, including this in data directory, which is currently empty. When we debug this application in Visual Studio, we need to specify the command line parameters. So what we're going to do is come up to the data processor drop-down here, and we're going to come down to data processor debug properties. We can now specify the command line arguments to pass to this console application when we run it in Visual Studio. In this first example, we want to process a single file, so we'll specify the -- file option, and then as the second command line argument, we'll say that we want to process a file called data1.txt inside that in directory within the PS data directory. So now we've specified that, we can close this window, head back to File Explorer, and copy this data1.txt file, and paste it into the in data directory. Let's head back to Visual Studio, and we'll go and run this console application for the first time. And you can see here we've successfully passed the command line options, and we're processing a single file, the file cpsdata in data1.txt. Let's just hit enter to quit. So now we've got the shell of this application. Let's go and add some code to check whether the specified input file actually exists, and if it doesn't exist, output an error message.